Where do you think humanity came from? Someone talks about evolution, someone about the origin of apes, some talk about the intervention of alien intelligence. And just imagine that an alien mind exists. I can see that you probably belong to the category of skeptics who listen to such things with a grin, but let's just assume for a second that this is true. Then if we assume that it was aliens who created people on Earth, do you have any idea what level of technology it was? Can you imagine what kind of knowledge the civilization had? But let's turn not to the end of this logical chain, but to its very beginning. I mean the moment when man was created. And why, in principle, should the gods or some aliens create a person? And why did they create us exactly as we are now? Where did the gods go then? Of course, many people still believe in them, but to be honest, the last few thousand years, when there is a more or less reliable record of historical facts, no presence or intervention of the gods in the course of history was not observed. Take, for example, the question of why we were created this way. But every person knows from childhood a quote from the Bible that we are created in the image and likeness of God. In other words, our creators reproduce their own copy. I will give you this example as an illustration. You know that many factories are currently undergoing automation and people are being replaced with robots. Right. Now tell me what, or rather who, these robots look like. Aren't they our own copy? It's just that our technology is too imperfect to reproduce an exact copy of a human. Manipulators are nothing more than an enlarged human hand, which is still able to perform only a limited set of actions. The structure of bones, ligaments, muscle fibers, cartilage at the joints, synovial fluid for lubrication. All this is too complex a mechanism that people are not yet able to copy, and therefore replace it with simple hinges and engine oil. And if we talk about the nervous system that should control all this, then there is a problem at all. Unlike divine technology such as genetic engineering or cloning, human copying technology still consists of dozens of electrical cables, relays, and microchips. We have made a huge leap in the last 50 years, but it is still too cumbersome and too highly specialized. However, when we create automatons and robots, we still copy ourselves. And someday cars will learn not only to weld seams and paint car bodies, they will start to walk, run and jump, drive cars and planes, carry heavy loads and perform complex work. Like masonry walls made of bricks. One day they will become multifunctional, and then you will understand what I'm talking about. Why, in principle, did the gods need to create their own small copies to make your life easier? This is just obvious. The gods created humans for exactly the same purpose, to make life easier for themselves. Just look at what kind of treatment is accepted in the church books, which just teach us how to treat our Creator. Servant of God. Exactly as slave. Don't get me wrong, because this is a very delicate point. Slaves are not meant to be bullied or humiliated in any way. We do not know what happened there in ancient times, but we can reliably believe that people were created exactly when the gods needed a lot of labor. Maybe they broke something on arrival on our planet, or they just had to build something grand, it is unknown. But with the technology of copying, or if you like creating biological beings from some matter, the gods simply reproduced the number of working automata they needed. Well, imagine that you yourself are alone on a desert island, and you need to get out of it by building a large ship. And imagine that you have in your hands a certain device that allows you to make the right number of your own clones. Won't you use it? It seems obvious to me. Don't forget what makes us humans different from animals. You know what we have and no one else has. Ability to speak. Only a person has a language, oral and then written. Language is a way to accumulate knowledge and pass it on to the next generation. This is a way to develop, and quite quickly. Is it possible to teach a dog or a cat something? Of course you can. But without being able to speak, the cub and the dog and cat will have to begin to comprehend the world anew. And so every time. Parents cannot transmit any information other than emotions to their children or relatives. Their cycle of evolution is limited to the period of life of one individual. But in humans, this is not so. We can teach a child from the age of 5 anything, even driving a car or playing on a computer. Do you understand the difference? If our language is a way of accumulating information and knowledge, You just need to study it carefully to understand a lot of things. You see, this is code. A code that doesn't need to be decrypted. It is enough just to discard the husk of the surrounding world and isolate keywords, stable expressions, phrases. No need to look for subtexts and complex explanations. You need to learn how to interpret this code the way a computer does, because it doesn't look for explanations when a floppy disk with the code is loaded into it. It just executes the specified commands verbatim. We are now talking about a narrow part of linguistics, and I want to show you that in our language, there is enough evidence of descent from humanity from the gods. Well, let's take for example the phrase that everyone has a divine beginning. If humans are a clone of the gods, then obviously we have their DNA in us. How do you like it? The familiar phrase takes on a completely different meaning, right? Or the phrase anointed of God, which means that not all people are equal. It means a person who stands above others and can command others. And by what right? Is he the smartest or the bravest? Not at all. The answer clearly tells us that he is simply appointed by the gods for this role, and does not necessarily have to be superior to the others. You will see what humanity has been doing all its 1,000-year history. Is it looking for the meaning of life? Right. Now let's look at it from a slightly different angle. Let's look for an answer not to the question what is the point, but why people are looking for it in principle. When the gods created their own slaves, they were just as afraid of the rise of the machines as we are now. Only they had more reason for this, because human machines and computers are far from ideal. But cloned copies of the gods are just the same ideal. And to protect themselves, the gods did two simple things. Guess what made people mortal? This is what people are called in all ancient myths, mortals. It was death, that is, the physical destruction of the body after some time gave a guarantee that there would be no uprising. People simply won't have time to rebel against their creators. Our bodies are designed for a service life of about 30 years, no more. Of course, due to improved living conditions, warm food, medicine and other things, people have managed to push this threshold 2 to 3 times further, but still it is negligible. There is not a person on earth who at least once in his life did not think about why people die. But if you take what I've told you on faith, it all falls into place. We are slaves, robots of the gods, and we have our own service life. The second trick is that they copied their body, that is, the physical shell. But it is also obvious that they have set up some kind of bridge in our heads that does not allow us to stand on the same level with them mentally. Do you know how modern computer processors always put a power limiter? After all, almost all chips can work much faster, but the manufacturer guarantees certain parameters of their operation only at a certain frequency, and artificially blocks everything else. Have you noticed that people spend their whole lives trying to do something with themselves? Some people learn something new, others go to the gym and train their body. And where did they get this sense of their imperfection? Well, tell me how people feel this discomfort. You don't even know how close you are to the truth right now. Being descendants of the gods, who were just the same absolutely perfect in terms of physical strength, and in terms of appearance, and mentally, and so on, people are acutely aware that they are missing something. After all, robots do not compare themselves with each other, and the descendants of the gods do this all the time. We, being slaves, or if you are more comfortable with automatons with jumpers in our heads, wander aimlessly around the planet in search of the lost self. And that's a shame we will never find, because the blocker in the mind does not let us understand what we lack for happiness. Happiness is the lot of the gods. They dance and sing, fight with each other, and drink wine to their heart's content. The gods are always happy, but the slaves of God are almost never. It happens, of course, that the biological protection fails and people are born with a blocking defect. In this case, we immediately call them geniuses because they are abnormally talented. And this accident only confirms the true capabilities of our brain. We call them gifted people because the creators of the machine slaves should not have such abilities. We say that there is a spark of God in them because they really have an unresolved part of talent. But most don't. Instead, they contain unhappiness, depression, and a subtle sense of longing and lack of demand. Where does this feeling come from? Yes, just because they have a tiny amount of the DNA of the gods in them, which gives them no peace, but they don't understand what to do with it because they are not gifted. This is similar to phantom pain, when the patient has pain that is not there, such as an amputated part of the leg. And humanity has many more amputees. Blockers in our brain and generate this eternal pain of searching for yourself. Thank you for your attention. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.